Hello, hello, everyone. Hello. Let me pull the stream up, make sure we flowing right. We always have flow issues when it comes to this live. Bang. Now, I'm actually starting to enjoy going live a whole lot more than I actually do pre-recorded videos, so I'm getting kind of addicted. And let me just send out to the Patreon. You guys already know tonight what we're talking about, obviously, due to the title. This is a very nerve-wracking conversation to have for 101 reasons. We're going to get into why that is. I'm sure that you guys have heard over the past few years this connection between the pedophilia agenda and the visibility of queer people. You probably have heard bestiality as well. So there's been a lot of other movements that have been said to be a part of the LGBT's movement, LGBT's agenda. So tonight I have two guests. You guys may already know them. One is a fellow YouTuber and one is on the way to being a fellow commentator if he's not shook to death already by how much of us are stalked down, doxed down, harassed down to the ground. But nonetheless, there's some cute perks, okay? There's cute perks. So let me share this out to my Patreon real quick. Let me speak to everybody in the chat real quick. I want you guys to thumb up this video. I do want you guys to share the stream out. I really want to have a real conversation about this subject because I think this is a really big topic and we probably won't even come to completion in this particular video, but we're going to scratch the surface and at least have a initial conversation, okay, about all of these things. Hey, Just Be Real, what's going on, boo? Hey, Shawana, what's going on, Nikki? What's going on, Ayo? Let me go to the Patreon real quick and then we can get the show on the road tonight. Once again, thumbs up this video, okay? Stop playing in my face and thumbs up this video. Like I said, every time I go live and I got to do sharing and Patreon, I feel like I'm dating a high maintenance ass bottom. It's just like a whole lot of shit going on at one given goddamn time. I mean, my fucking social medias might as well be transitioning themselves because they're always in that. Okay. Live right now. Click the motherfucking link. Click link. Click link. Hello to everyone coming in. Nice to see you all. I'm probably going to jump into the Patreon right after this too because I have neglected my Patreon for most of the month and it's just been a lot of shit going on, but we're going to go over there and talk. Click now. A bitch live. I'm like a bird. Send notification. I'll get that out the way. Bring the stream back up. Okay, so let me bring my guest in. I'm going to bring in Captivating Christian. You guys may already know him from the infamous Gentleman's Panel and his wellness and political midday news breakouts. Okay, he's informing you motherfuckers about what's going on politically, what's going on presidentially, and unmute your mic, sir. There you go. Up to the people.
Hey, how you doing? And thank you for having me, Conscious. Thank you. And hello to everybody in the chat. I am Captivating Christian of CCN Network TV. Oh, that you froze for a second. So what's going on, sir?
Oh, you don't get your introduction. I'm like,
yeah,
all right. Yes, that's CC. Make sure you go subscribe to CC's platform. I'm going to have his links in the description bar. And I want to bring over another one of his good friends, okay, who from time to time substitutes his main co-star. But we're trying to make this young man a predominant commentator as well because he's just so sweet and so nice. Mr. Antonio D, welcome to Consciouztv.
Hey, thank you for having me.
What's going on?
How are you guys
to be here
today?
We're good.
Amazing.
everybody looks pale-faced to have this conversation. I told them that we might be on our way to getting canceled after this video. Who fucking knows?
I mean,
I'm so excited about that.
I don't know. It was just it was interesting. I'll say that. It really was.
Okay.
I learned a lot.
I think about the subject tonight is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean that's all I'm gonna say without giving too much right now.
Okay.
I'll just say it was quite interesting to delve a little deep into this.
You, Antonio, how do you feel in general about the subject?
I can't really say much. I just we'll see.
Okay. Well, we're going to see. We're going to travel down the rabbit hole. Now, you guys are all same gender loving men yourself. Have you guys heard this narrative about pedophilia, bestiality, also being something that people assume is coming down the pipeline since trans people and queer people have showed up in the mainstream spotlight? Have you guys even heard of this narrative?
I'll say this. I came across an article some time ago, and they were talking about creating a new flag to be a part of the LGBT community flag for people who engage in pedophilia. And I was like, what? What the hell? And this was like a year ago. And it took me by surprise. It really did. I was really like, wow, are we really having this conversation? So when you brought the topic to my attention, I was like, wow, like this is really, really, really crazy. So I don't know. I feel I definitely personally feel like, no, how could you even consider this to be a sexual orientation? But as far as research wise, what I've actually read and researched and looked up, it's like, yeah. So I'm torn. I'll say that I am torn.
Okay. So what about you, Antonio? Like, have you heard this growing narrative over the past few years, ever since kind of like the LGBT movement was kind of given a catalyst and given some leeway in society, that we are now introducing or should be prepared to also have the government push pedophilia upon us and bestiality because queer people are here? Or you haven't really heard that narrative?
I heard a few years ago that they were going to, of course this is speculation, that they were going to create child sex dolls for pedophiles. So does it surprise me that we've gotten to this point where they're trying to make this a thing? No, not at all, by no means. But when it comes to stuff like that, it's I don't know. It's because go ahead, sorry.
No.
It's okay. So there's something, you know me, I'm always something sexual. There is something in the sexual realm called age play, where people will, let's just say that the husband is the husband and the wife will dress up like a schoolgirl. Like, so I guess they're trying to equate it to a fetish. Maybe I'm misunderstanding it. I don't. Again, this is a very gray topic to try to get to the logic of. Yeah. So that's why I'm trying to get to my personal understanding of what's going on with it.
Okay, I'm gonna note that. That's very interesting because I have some different directions I want to take this conversation in. So I'm gonna keep that in mind. Okay. So I guess the first thing that I want to do is I want to address this being a part of the LGBTQIA agenda. This actually is a myth. There is literally no information, no data, no receipts to support that the institution, the association, the incorporation known as the LGBT movement is in any kind of way endorsing pedophilia, okay? Now, I wrote down an initial little introduction that I'm going to read off here really quick, just as a sounding board for where we're going to go going forward. Okay. I titled this, Where Did It Start? And I
No, I didn't say anything.
Matter of fact, in the chat, are you guys like seeing me like clear? Because I know when I do StreamYard, shit get glitchy, shit gets, hey Olivia the Oracle, shit gets really glitchy and staticky. So am I talking smoothly, or am I phasing in and out? Because if so, I'll just switch from my home Wi-Fi to my hotspot.
No, you're fine. You're fine on my end.
Well, yeah, like I'm gonna look smooth.
Yeah, on
them in the chat is gonna be really fucking jumpy, which is weird as hell. So let me know if everybody is sounding fluid, but particularly me, because I'm sure that these men are on quality Wi-Fi. I'm on South Carolina's Wi-Fi. That's equivalent to Detroit water. It's clear. Okay. Thank you too.
Really?
Baby mama, thank you. Okay.
Really?
Everybody is agreeing that everything's moving well. Okay, all right. So where did it start? In 1997, Anita Bryant, a frail-faced, white privileged American singer and anti-gay rights activist, campaigned a successful ordinance that permitted queer discrimination in an organization she created and called Save Our Children, that stigmatized and warned that gay men particularly were deviant-minded, and that occupations like childcare and teaching positions could give way for gay men to molest and sexually abuse children. These narratives stuck like grits for years to come, such as organizations like the Boy Scouts of America excluding Gay Scouts and Gay Scout Masters. Mind you, for all of you who have been curious as to how queer people have been systemically oppressed, these are just a few examples of how, as well as queer people discriminated against in donating blood, and even within adoption agencies to qualify as parents, just to name a few.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the MAPS flag, aka Minor Attracted Persons flag, was narrated and tied into the LGBT movement in 2018 on social media when a tweet went out warning and connecting the LGBT movement to MAPS, and that tweet was reposted over 20,000 times, and the urban legend was then born. So ever since some random weird shook ass down low man decided to tweet MAPS being in some relationship to the LGBTQIA organization and it's out into mainstream media, this was the rise and the birth of that narrative. Now, that's in terms of how it kind of rose on social media, but we have heard this type of narrative in religion. I remember when Obama was in office and legalizing gay marriage came along, the church whined and wheeled and rolled around and seizured out, saying that this was the wrong direction for America to go in, because once we start allowing men to be with men and women to be with women, that then men are going to be arguing that they should be able to marry their pets, and that young prepubescent boys should be able to marry grown men, and prepubescent girls should be able to marry women, and vice versa. So these aren't new, okay? Now, have you guys heard of MAPS, which is the Minor Attracted Persons organization?
It's my first time hearing it.
No, it's my first time hearing it as well.
So let me go to the website, okay?
I actually just looked up the flag as you were talking about it.
Yeah.
So the MAPS flag is actually the flag that I have in the thumbnail, with the kind of really dull colors.
Dull colors of the rainbow. Yeah.
Which I think is a bad correlation idea, but I mean,
I know, right? They're even using the color scheme. I'm just like, of course, this was bound to end up in the same family together. Like you got kind of, hijacking our little palette and our little symbol. So of course I can see how people kind of connected the two. But the concept of minors attracted persons is perceived by some as part of an attempt to normalize pedophilia. An umbrella term used by organizations such as Before You Act, or the Global Prevention Project, an organization that addresses risky sexual thoughts, fantasies, and non-contact problematic sexual behavior in adults and women. Now, MAPS in particularly is an organization that was those who are afflicted with these impulses and these feelings. This is a therapeutic space. Kind of think of Alcoholics Anonymous or a drug abuse community where people who are fighting through their sickness, through their alcoholism, through their addiction can seek support psychologically, medically, etc. So as it relates to MAPS, as it relates to people with these impulses, I guess this is also where the question of, is pedophilia a sexual orientation? If somebody is predominantly attracted to, I'm going to even exclude teenagers, somebody who is predominantly attracted to what we would call children, prepubescent or adolescent, before puberty, 13 and back, could you consider that a sexual orientation based upon your understanding of what a sexual orientation is?
Me personally, no. I think it's crazy, but I have delved into this all day and trying to make sense of how these sexual fantasies and urges of underage boys or girls in some aspects correlates. I mean, it's like, I don't know, the person even hasn't even developed anything yet. I just find it to be a bit disgusting. There's no treatment for it. There's nothing that anybody can do to like stop it. There's only the Harvard Medical School did some research on it. There's only two things that they do. They do psychotherapy and drug treatment to curb the urges, the sexual arousal of the people who are prepubescent attracted. I don't know. It's just it's dangerous, and it just makes everything so crazy. Like it's so much to even, I can't even get the words out, because it just, I see how some people correlate the two because it is of same-sex gender usually.
So let's strip just even same sex and just deal within the realm and the umbrella of sexual orientation. Heterosexuality would fall, homosexuality would
right,
fall,
but that's right, but that was exactly what I'm getting to. It's always equated to as something homosexual when it's actually sexual in nature, because it happens in heterosexuals. It could be, you know, a man or a woman attracted to and aroused by a younger person. So, I mean, back in, you know, ancient times, as far as ancient Rome was concerned, it was a...
Hold on, don't go there yet, because we're going to segue into what you're about to go into.
Okay, I'll hold that.
So hold that thought right there. But before I go to Antonio, sexual orientation though, like if someone is predominantly attracted to children, what makes you apprehensive to call that a orientation if that's the way the way a person's attraction is set up? What would make their impulses and their predominant impulses any different from my impulse or your impulse for the same sex or a heterosexual's opposite sex?
Well, because at the time they're not of age. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just... But
not even dealing with the children themselves, just in terms of how the pedophile feels, what makes you not call whatever is motivating or creating,
you need to control that.
What makes you not assign that to sexual orientation? I want you to be clear on.
I just don't equate it to a sexual orientation. I personally don't. I mean, I know that, you know, it can be. It don't sit well with me as labeling it as a sexual orientation. I'll say that.
Do you think that?
Don't.
Do you think that's because we ourselves as same gender loving men are so scrutinized by our own, so it makes you apprehensive to even remotely include someone who's a pedophile and identify what they feel also as an orientation, or you just feel like in and of itself it's just
no? Personally, I just feel like in and of itself it is something that is somewhat completely off base. Like as far as the mental disorders go, if we were labeling as far as the greater of mental illnesses and going down the list as far as sexual, yeah, that would be at the top of the list. Because for me, there is no way you can, because then it becomes self-control. Like you could have a sexual urge, but you should be able to control yourself and have self-control of that urge. So the fact that you can't even control that is dangerous in and of itself as someone who would have a sexual orientation that they can't shake. You need to, I can't. I just,
Okay. Antonio D, same question. Would you lump pedophilia in the same category of sexual orientation based upon your definition of sexual orientation?
No.
Okay.
Because I just feel as though in labeling it a sexual orientation.
And can you speak up just a little bit because you sound like a little low?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. It might be my thing. Okay, so I think in labeling it a sexual orientation, it's making it okay when it's not something that is okay. For someone who gives themselves this title, you have to wonder, how are you satisfying this urge and with what children? So let's just say that there's a group of them talking and discussing. Whose children are they discussing? The children in the park? What do? Just gather in the park and discuss children? Is that okay? I don't think so. It doesn't. Go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just don't think that labeling it as an orientation and proudly say I'm attracted to children, that doesn't sit right in no aspect, in any aspect.
I just think it's a sense of dominance a little bit. You know, I think it could go a little deeper as into what about these non-hitting puberty children are you so aroused by? And I think it might just be the dominant factor, the fact that you are in complete control of this younger person, that you know that there is nothing that they can do to deny you what you want. And that brings on a whole level of just things that are just really disgusting. And like someone said in the chat, the community is always put as the scapegoat to that. And it's like
the LGBT community.
Yes, right. The LGBT community is always used as a scapegoat to, tie along, like, oh, they believe in pedophilia. And it's like, no, that's not the case. There's a destructive level in this to where in which it's almost like the urge to kind of
prey.
To prey on and reform and destruct. It's almost very destructive because it's like you think of a child as someone who is growing into themselves. They don't even know themselves, know anything about mostly sexual anything. And here's someone who is fully grown and aware of their sexuality and their sexual urges and has discovered or whatever, preying on that. And it's outrageous that, and I get it. Everybody, if you're going to fight for rights for one or say this one has rights in America, quote unquote, you need to say that everybody has rights, but I can't get with it. I can't.
Okay, so let me do a lot of preferencing to this conversation before we even proceed any further. So a part of why I think it's important to have this conversation is because immediately when we think of pedophiles, what we imagine are people who have already acted upon their impulse. This does not represent the pedophile community at large. You have pedophiles in the form of relatives, friends, teachers, principals, politicians, unbeknownst to you. And there are pedophiles who have made a ethical and moral choice to not act upon their orientation because they understand the consequences of acting upon that impulse, which is why I assume organizations like MAP and Before You Act exist, is to keep accountability on behalf of people who are trying to maintain their deviancy or maintain control and accountability over their impulses. One of the things that really made me, I was talking to a friend a while ago, and I was telling him being queer has really shaped my sense of compassion. And I know that we as queer people oftentimes have complaint that other communities who have endured certain oppressions and stigmatization should have been in a position to be more compassionate and empathetic toward the queer community, like the Black community. And the Black community doesn't like to really hear that comparison. I think we're literally comparing sexual orientation to race, and we're not. We are comparing the struggle, which we feel should have incited more empathy toward another group oppressed by social narratives, etc. So for me, being a queer person and knowing what it's like to be something different, to be something that has a horrible stigma to it. I just went on to Yes Bitch TV's platform, I think 2 days ago, and me and 3 other queer men shared our experiences of growing up in the church, what it felt like to be labeled an abomination, even for queer people who had not even acted upon their sexual orientation. We had those narratives in our head before we even had our first kiss, before we even had our first hunch. We already were riddled with shame, already riddled with all of these things. And so I myself, when I started, and also molestation and rape has been a part of a lot of black people's experience. Everybody kind of, it's a running rumor within Black communities that there's that token rapist uncle, that there's that token molester within the family, etc. And so a lot of Black men and women have endured abuse and have been violated, etc. And thinking about those people, like when I pull back, because this is an issue that, and my family doesn't like when I speak about this publicly, but I feel like as long as I don't name names, then hey, fuck you. So there's been sexual abuse in my own family.
Mine too.
And I guess just for the sake of conversation and my family seeing this video, I'm not even going to say whether the abuser is male or female, but there's been molestation, there's been sexual abuse, and I have seen the pain of the victims, even who are well into adulthood, who now have children of their own, who still deal with the trauma of their experience growing up. The experience of being molested while mommy and daddy was at work, and the older sibling taking advantage of them in the tub, taking advantage of them while bathing them. And there's one particular relative who really wrestled with this trauma. Like this particular relative was having nightmares well up until like the last few years is when they really stopped. And like 60 at this point. But I also began to think about the relative who's the abuser. I also watched the abuser and the one accused of doing these things develop a very strong drinking habit, has an introverted nature that I now know because I know my family's history comes from probably a internalized shame about what was done, and it's drinking down the guilt and the shame of that. And I look at that particular relative and I say, my God, for me, and I do understand why people demonize molesters and child molesters. And I'm just going to go on record and say, if you have already acted upon your desire as a pedophile, whatever consequences you are completely justified, whether that's imprisonment, whether that's being murdered, whatever the consequences are that followed, someone discovering that you abused their child. It just is what it is. But I also feel sorry for my relative. And I have wrestled with feeling sorry for the particular relative who was the abuser in this instance, because, and this is where I'm bringing it back to the gay thing. Straight people oftentimes say that they don't know what the fuck it's like to be gay. I, on the other hand, have to apply that same thing when it comes to pedophiles. Like, I don't know what the fuck is going on inside of you. I can't even, I would be arrogant to assume what that feels like, to assume, and I can only assume that it feels, whether it is or not, that it feels like any other orientation, which is why it's executed, and it's executed sexually, because it's a sexual orientation. These pedophiles are not trying to marry these children. They are engaged in sexuality with these children. And so, because I feel like we live in a country that does not, that like immediately when we hear pedophiles, we go to the person who has already been molesting. So immediately we're done with the conversation. There's nothing to talk about, period on the sentence. Don't want to hear no more. What are we really here talking about? But what we're also really here talking about is a phenomenon that we absolutely don't know shit about. And oftentimes we can't even, as a community, really sit down and talk about and really kind of flip through and dig through, because while you do have the abusers who are actual abusers, you have pedophiles who have not even acted upon that. And I think those pedophiles who are showing restraint, those pedophiles live their whole life never touching a child, never being inappropriate toward a child, never engaging in any, I think they deserve this conversation. I agree. They deserve the intellect of America to do its job, to talk about these issues so that we can create, so that we can make provisions to help these people so that they can continue on in their personal good fight to stay upright and to stay from their impulses. And even having this conversation and hosting this conversation made me extremely nervous, because I know how fucking stupid people are, and I know how fucking emotional people are, and I know how people just don't critically think, which I feel ashamed about as an American, because me personally, I am an intellectual. I will go deeper than the average person when it comes to any given fucking subject, which is why I don't even talk to most. I don't even talk to the average person, because I go down the rabbit holes. I'm not afraid to apply my brain to things that are taboo or controversial, because I have a organic desire to understand the way shit is and the way creation is. So with that precedence being set, I want us to have a compassionate conversation, not for those who have already acted upon it, but I want to really think about this thing as it relates to those who haven't acted upon it. And when we go back to the question of sexual orientation, Look, to be a queer man talking about this is even weird for me, because there's still people today who believe that we have mental illnesses.
Yeah.
That our attraction to one another is a mental illness. Now, I want to say, under no given fucking circumstances would I ever want to see pedophilia legalized.
Right.
But what I do want to see is more scientific research, and I want more provisions made to identify these people, and I want our techniques and our remedies to be as effective as possible for these people, so that they can maintain whatever the fuck this is, whether it's orientation, impulse, whatever. Just, we need the research, we need the medicine, we need the technology, we need the community, we need whatever we need to help this case. Now, I'm going to let you guys respond to what I just said before I proceed further, and then we're going to kind of flip through the comment section real quick and address some things, and then get back into this conversation. But I'm going to let Christian, you respond to what I just laid out in this dissertation.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. As far as individuals who have not acted upon their impulses and their sexual urges, you're absolutely right. They do need our support. They need further treatment, further study to help them be able to maintain the level of whatever kind of normalcy that they have that helps them go through life. You're absolutely right on that. As far as what you were saying earlier, I totally agree. I mean, I have a family member myself, and it's like for the longest time, I did not feel sorry, and I did not get it. But then as I got older, I realized that hurt people. And sometimes you have to dig a little deeper to realize someone may have done a horrible thing to that person, and the cycle just continued. But when do we get to a point where we stop the cycle? That's a whole nother conversation for another time. But
we can have this conversation if we have time.
He's silly. But even going back to it, yes, I do. There's something that needs to be done. I mean, we do need to come together and help, like I said, help those who have not, and I keep repeating that, have not acted on that impulse. But those who have acted upon those impulses, you get everything that is coming to you, with like you said, jail time or anything of that nature. Because you're taking an innocent human being and creating a life for them that will never be the same. And who gave you that right? It's almost like you playing God almost. And I kind of shake with that a little bit. But for some, I'm not even, I don't even know if it, I really can't even say what it is. Like, there's nothing I could see in a child that would even get any part arousal. It's like, how could you? I don't know. How could you feel that way? But
I'm gonna let Antonio respond. But I want to say to that, that's what I find to be interesting about sexual orientation or attraction in general is, you haven't intellectualized your attraction to men. You just have an attraction to men. Like, you haven't thought your way into being turned on by men. You're just turned on by men. Like, the same thing for heterosexuals. They haven't intellectualized their way into their attraction. They just are attracted to the opposite sex. And I can only assume that whatever pedophilia is just as organic as whatever we're considering to be orientation, that the way that they feel moves the same way, that these things aren't thought out. Obviously, they're just impulses. Like, it's literally a impulse. And because in speaking about the pedophiles who are not acting on it, what they've done is attempted to intellectualize themselves out of it and can't. All they can do is restrain themselves.
Right.
Because with your makeup, either as an orientation or either as a mental illness, then you essentially are powerless in terms of the function of it. Now, whether you express that is where the pedophiles have control over. Like, I can't control the way that I feel, but I can control what I do.
Right.
You know? And so that's where the need for community, the need for the research, the need for the science comes into play at. But before I go there, I want to let you, Antonio D, kind of respond to, I guess, what Christian just said in my long ass dissertation before Christian started speaking as well.
Oh, you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay, so while everyone was talking, I looked up two definitions because I wanted to make sure that I clearly understood what was considered a sexual orientation versus what I believe this is, which is a fetish. So a sexual orientation is labeled as a person's sexual identity in relation to the gender to which they are attracted to, the fact of being heterosexual, homosexual, or bisexual. Now, the definition for a fetish is a form of sexual desire in which gratification is linked to an abnormal degree to a particular object, item of clothing, part of the body, etc. So it would be considered a fetish, in my opinion, not a sexual orientation. I know that's kind of jumping back to the original question, but I just wanted to clear that part out. Okay, so in regards to the second part, where your question was for those people who have not acted on their impulses to their fetish and have decided to brandish a flag, establish a correlation, let's just call it pedophiles who don't touch. That's fine. Whatever. If that's what you want to call it, that's what you want to call it. I don't think we should be applauding people for self-control when it's something that should just be done. I mean, in regards to everybody in the chat, everybody on this panel, we all have urges every day. We have urges to hit people. We don't do it.
And I do.
See, but you get where I'm going with it. We all have urges that we don't do. There's people every single day that we come across that we want to hit, we want to scream at. Sometimes we see attractive people and we want to go, I mean, we can, yeah, but you don't. It's a matter of just self-control. I don't believe in patting someone on the back for something that we believe we're supposed to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Okay, but just to be clear though, we aren't talking about patting anyone on the back, or we're talking about just providing resources for people to continue, because it's also, see, like, self-control also isn't like just a light switch. I mean, if that was the case, the prisons would be empty. If that was the case, nobody would have a court case. If that was the case, people would not have lived to regret different things that they did throughout their lifetime, whether that was beat the fuck out of a bitch, whether that was sleep with that woman's husband, whether that was whatever. Self-control is something that has to be cultivated, not something that's just automatic for you, because if you weren't taught and trained to be disciplined, you wouldn't probably have any naturally. And if you were raised in environments where people didn't instill, or you were not a part of institutions that instill discipline, that particular practice wouldn't be there. Even for me, like Buddhism and Christianity, Christian mysticism particularly, has been something that has helped me to be a very, 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 very disciplined person. Like my work ethic, my consistency in the things that I do, being able to apply all of my attention and all of my energy to any given task is something that I had to literally cultivate. Or else I would still have the attention span of a 12-year-old. I would still be, a mess, not doing my homework, not completing my tasks, being partial in my execution of my tasks and my responsibilities, etc. So I just want to make sure that we don't talk about self-control should be rewarded, because it's something that has to be learned. And if you learn to be a disciplined person, that is a phenomenal trait. One of the reasons why we praise Beyonce is because of her disciplines. One of the reasons why we can't shut Christian, don't you dare. Okay. But one of the notable things about her character is that she seems to be a very disciplined person. We know that she's very hard. Whether you think she's overrated, that's beside the point. But the bitch is hard working. She's working hard to get on your nerve and to make you hate her. She's very, very consistent in that way. Okay. So I do think that discipline is a very powerful feature. And I also, because there's a lot of people right now who are also being triggered by this conversation, which is, so I just want the comment section to, once again, remember, we're really talking about pedophiles who do not act upon their impulses. We're not really talking about pedophiles who have already violated people, etc. But I think there is something to be said about this nation who hasn't made a concerted effort to speak about this topic. I think, well, in some kind of way, left a people behind. Like, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I do. Just real quick. Okay, so the Harvard Medical defined pedophilia as a mental disorder from someone who acts upon their sexual fantasies and urges. So then, do we even consider those who are pre-adolescent attracted pedophiles if they have not acted upon it?
According to that definition, then no, they aren't pedophiles. They're just people with I don't know what to call them, but they wouldn't be.
That's what put me at the it was like a Oprah aha moment. You know what I'm saying? Because me, when I think about it, that's all I think about is
what they've done,
touching a young child, not someone who actually has an urge that never acted upon it. Do they get the same treatment as you would treat someone who has acted upon it? Do they get the same judgment and stigma and so on and so forth? So I don't know. It's just interesting.
Let's just say, for conversation's sake, you're out at a dinner, new group of friends. We're at a social mixer. A whole bunch of social media people are together and they're just talking. And then you meet one and he goes, "Did you see that dog outside?" "Yeah." "That dog is cute." "What?"
What? I mean, at that point it would be just a dog. But I mean, if you went further and said, "Oh, that that dog is sexy," or
but again, people say that dogs are cute all the time.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Right. You saying a dog is cute, it's like, okay,
sexualize the dog,
right? But if you sexualizing the dog, I think that in lies the difference, where it's like, okay, hold up.
And that's kind of where I was going with it. So let's just say that they have a thing for dogs. Like they don't touch dogs actually, but they do watch, I guess, animal porn or something like that. So would you consider them like a person that enjoys bestiality? Would that be considered? Was that what you would? I don't know what the name is for a person that likes animals. I just know it's called bestiality. See, exactly. It's called bestiality when you're doing it. But if you didn't do it, then what would you call it? That goes back to the original question. If you never touched a child, you would never be considered a pedophile.
Come on, Antonio, you better open up the philosophical lines.
Yeah, I'm having mind explosions right here from my own example.
Again, but that was my Oprah aha moment when when at first I was very like, what? No, what are you talking about? I'm going through the history. I'm reading it, and I'm like, okay, whatever, got it. And then when I read that portion, I was like, well, if the person doesn't act upon it, and it's only defined by those who act upon their sexual urges, then what are we left with?
I don't even know. I mean, I guess you could say a person with a fetish, but I guess.
Well, I don't even think the label is like even. I don't even think the names are even like. Like, do y'all think the names are like the nuance of pedophilia, prepubescent, adolescent? Like, do y'all think it matters? Because I know that Christian earlier was about to hint to how in different cultures there's different age of consent laws that still in a lot of cultures. I guess that's where you were going.
Yeah, I was going like
I'm gonna let you go into that. I'm gonna capitalize.
You know, like even going back history wise, the samurais, they used to have boys, the soldiers would have boys as sexual partners, because they believed that it was more of a spiritual thing, that they were connecting with their battle spirit. And when the boy became of age and started to grow facial hair, he would then still be the older man's, I guess, valet or what have you, until he himself, you know, became a warrior and took a child, a boy of his own. Now, the father would, you know, groom the boy or what have you, and then choose the samurai warrior that the child would go to. Just like, you know, I guess you know, back in the days when the father would pick the person that the daughter is going to marry, that kind of thing. In ancient history, as far as the Greeks were concerned, again, it was something to do as far as the man grooming the child to a higher place, education, religion, so on and so forth. Plato himself was against it and felt that, and this was during Greece, whatever, during ancient Greece time. Plato was against it and felt that it would damage a child, because at one point during the Roman era, it became something to do socially. It had nothing to do with anything spiritual, anything educational. It was a thing of status to have a young child engaging in sexual activity. It was just something to do. When Christianity came along, that's when it changed. And of course, it kind of fell into the abyss, or, you know, kind of taboo to actually have that construct. But, you know, it's been around for quite some time, but in different realms and aspects.
I agree to that. I mean, if what we're calling pedophilia in the Western society is something that is unfortunately an age-old practice, a lot of Black supremacist groups will say that these are European practices, but our African forefathers also married young girls as young as 11 and 10 were being brides and concubines. Like, these practices and these ideas around youth and these ideas around virginity have bled over even into the Western world. I find it very interesting that even today we get so frown-faced when we talk about pedophilia, but we all like grew when we were growing up in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, and there was lots of fetishes that Black men had as it related to young girls that kind of didn't get no fucking backlash. It was almost like there was this undertone of social acceptance that it was, you know, okay to look for the youngest, to look for you know, and even in, because what I find interesting also on the other flip side of that is like me myself,
Not Jesus Christ. All right, boy, here we go.
I was always into older men. I've never been into niggas my age growing up.
That word, but okay.
What a nigga? Okay, yes. I was into more. I was not into young Moors growing up.
I get you.
I was always into older men, and
just curious, what age did you have that realization?
Like the minute that the minute that I realized that boys were yucky and dumb, like probably like as early as 13, but I didn't start dating until I was like 16. But I had lost my virginity at 17 to a 32-year-old man who I was involved with. Yes, the first boyfriend. Well, he was my second boyfriend because my first boyfriend was my age. Like we were both 16 at the time, but we had broken up. And I had met this guy named Corey, and he was 32 at the time, and I was young.
Not watching.
Huh?
I said, I hope you're not watching.
This is his truth. He can't have no fucking shame about his truth. This is fucking truth. Shit. Well, this is our truth now because you included me in your truth. So, and he was 32 at the time, and I fell in love with him. And I was 17 going on 18. And so right in that intercom, I had lost my virginity. Now, even in America, every state has a different age of consent law. Even in some states, 16 is still the legal age of consent. I think I believe the youngest in this country is 15 years old. I think it might be 16 across the board at the least. I know over in certain parts of Africa, I think particularly in Nigeria, I think the age of consent law is as young as I believe. I want to say 11, between 11 and 13, I believe. And so like all across the world, we're still having this, there's still this conversation about how like sexuality and how to relate that to how is it related to young people and in what fucking way? And do you have older people attracted to younger people and younger people like myself who are attracted to older men? I know a lot of women also can attest that they also were attracted to older men growing up, that they were not into a lot of the guys their age. They liked the more seasoned man. Now bringing that back around to the age of consent. What do y'all think about age of consent? Just for
what age at what age can you say is appropriate to decide?
I can't hear.
I'm sorry, I don't know why I keep doing that. But what age can you say it's appropriate to decide for someone to have sex with somebody else? Like, because people come to their realizations at different ages. That's why I asked you earlier, when did you realize that you were into older men? And you said 13.
Okay, well, first of all, I realized I was into the same sex when I was like 5 and hunching on the side of the apartment complex with other boys. So I think that's
okay.
I think that's also interesting how we also talk about children having no sexuality. I being honest, as a young Black boy, being raised in the urban communities, we were hunching and playing high go get it at ages where we sexuality was a part of young people's experience, and children were behaving in very mannish ways outside of their parent supervision, etc., amongst one another, playing house, all of those different things. And so I'm gonna let you finish, Antonio. Go ahead.
So, pretty much like at what age can you say is a universal across the board? This is the age when you realize what you're attracted to, and you also understand that you want to take things further than just the kids. So you said you realized that you were into older men at 13, right? That's what you said?
That I was 13?
Yes.
When I was in Ultra guys?
Yes.
Well, technically, I was 15. I was a freshman in high school when I realized I preferred to date older men than the men might. Boys.
Okay,
might.
So 13, 15, whatever. So let's just say that we three make the laws. You said 15. Okay, so is that your vote? Let's just say you have 3 children. They're okay to decide who they sleep with at 15?
I want the law to be that you don't get to have sex until I tell you fucking to as a parent.
That's not, exactly. That's the problem. That's not what we're talking about. Is this the law that you're going to make? To say, that now you have 3 children. Is this the law that you want to say that At 15, you can decide who you legally want to have sex with. And Christian, this is the same question for you. Can you say that at 15 or whatever, when did you decide what you liked, or when did you decide what you want to do? I just think it's hard to come up with an age of consent. But I just think it's hard to come up with an age of consent because everybody grows differently. Everybody develops feelings differently. There's some people who are 30 years old and have never acted on their sexual impulses because it's just not there for them. So it's hard to say when someone understands this is how I feel and this is how I'm going to act on it. So it's to actually bog down an actual number to say, okay, this is when this person understands this. It's hard, and I don't think it can be done.
So then what? So then before I go to captivating Christian, and he is certainly captivating.
All right, settle down. I'm in the room.
What then would you say to the age of consent then? Like, since you believe that every growing young man and young woman is coming into different is coming into self-awareness at different points in their life, then if you had to cast your vote in, what would the age of consent be?
I lost my virginity at 14.
Oh, you was hoeing out early. Jeez.
So, mind you, it wasn't even my idea. It was hers. She came over my house after I broke up with her. And
she?
Yes.
Oh, you don't get to promote heterosexuality on this channel.
I'm not.
You don't, like, that's what people don't get to do.
Well, for some of us, that's how it started. That's all I'm saying. That's how it started.
So you lost your virginity at 13?
14.
14.
14. I was in the 9th grade.
Okay.
So I knew fully aware of what I was doing. It just wasn't. It was whatever. So I guess. What was that?
It was his face. He said, "I'm sure." Go ahead.
So I and then I'm thinking about it. If I have 3 children, can I say that my 14-year-old son or daughter came home and be like, "All right, I want to have sex with this 45-year-old. You want to do what? You want to do what? Who is this person? And how did we even get here? How do you know them?" Sorry, getting off topic. I put myself in the actual situation. But I honestly, I guess 16 is okay. I just, like I said, it's hard to actually get down to that number.
But why the age of consent law can't be given to the parents? Like, let's say that, well, you know what? Maybe it's 16. Maybe it's 16 because the government has decided that that's the legal age, I guess, in which you can decide where you want to live and if you want to move out and which parent you want to be with. And so I guess the level of independence is acknowledged at that age. So that's when activity can start. Okay, but captivating Christian for you, like, what?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with it, but that is the age where the law of the land says that a child, of course, in our eyes, has the right to legally decide what they want to do. So that's why 16 is that age. Personally, I just feel like if a child is under a parent's supervision, then it should be when they legally leave the nest. Like for myself, personally speaking, I mean, I humped and did things as I thought I was supposed to, because that, my brother was older and it was like, okay, I'm just following the trend a little bit. But as far as like me really branching out and really understanding my own sexuality and going through that, I waited till I was well out the house to like really be like, okay. And for me, it was a respect thing. Like I just did not, it was like, no, I really want to be out on my own and discover who I am and what I like. And
you don't want your mama hearing you come.
I don't like.
Your booty out in the next room.
No, well, personally, because she always heard,
walls.
I mean, personally, she always heard my brother hunching, and she would be, banging on the door or doing.
Well, hearing a girl scream is different from a big baritone voice, more man
Tell Barry White to shut up.
Well, I mean, even that, I don't know. I just didn't. It was that unspoken, like, you already know that's a bad. You already know that's a touchy subject. I mean, I did have older family members, and you know, my great aunt had a close friend of hers and my mom who was actually gay. So I knew of people of the community who, you know, who were around, but it was always that there's so and so, you know. So, and you're sitting around that and you're like, oh gosh, like, okay, well, I guess it's not the time to say, you know, I guess I'll just keep it to myself. So when I grew into myself and was able to, you know, go to school and do all that, then it was different. So I think, just personally speaking, that 16 is far too young. Definitely when, you know, you become older and more mature, because I would say even 18 is too young. You know how many times going to school, soon as the parents left, and you know they was all packed in and parents left, some girls ended up pregnant before the semester even started fully. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was just like that. So, and you thinking, but you came all the way here just to do that? You couldn't do that when you was at home to get pregnant, low less, and have to leave school. Like, what are you doing? So, I mean, I don't know. It's just it's touchy. It's here or there, but I just think that 16 is way too young.
You know what? I'm thinking that the age of consent law should be based upon financial literacy and independence, because since the consequences of sex, well, I guess this will only apply to heterosexuals, but they're the only ones who need to be disciplined anyway. So for them,
no, don't even say that. We need to be disciplined too, because a lot of us sitting up there throwing around dirty penises and dirty booty holes. I know.
Captivating.
I know.
I'm being sarcastic. So
I know.
But I mean, look, I feel like as long the age of consent, I just think that the age of consent law should be, as long as you're living in my house, I should get to decide when you have fucking sex. Okay, when you can get out on your own and whatever, then like when I'm still legally responsible, like when I still have legal you can have sex with my legally, according to the government. Like 16 is when they allow you at. Well, I guess this is why 16 is what they allow. So I guess that's when.
But 18 is before you can actually do anything.
The government came to that decision. So you allow what are essentially teenagers, to participate in sex. However, you don't allow them to purchase cigarettes until they're 18.
Yeah, but as a parent,
they can't buy alcohol until they're 21. So why they just can't smoke and get drunk and be having sex at 16? I mean, I don't even understand what.
But as a parent, how would you regulate that though? Like, even if you
to the doctor, making sure that you're still intact.
For the woman, you can do that. For a man, you can't. For a boy child, how you can do that? How could you do that?
My great grandmother used to monitor my mother and my cousin. They were, of course, two girls. So my great grandmother had all the menstrual stuff in her bedroom, and she kept track of their cycles and everything. And my mother said my great grandmother wanted to see the blood to make sure that they weren't pregnant. So there's certain things you can do for girls, but in terms of guys, you can't.
But in society, that's how it is. Praise for men to engage in sexual, behavior far more than it is for women. Even now, when you talk about the Will and Jada situation, Jada is like, oh my God, like, how could you do that? But if Will did it, it'd be like, well,
I
mean, wait. Go ahead, Antonio.
I was just pretty much feeding into what he said. A man will be a man, and a lot of people, especially a lot of older people, still feel that same view, where men go out and run the streets, and as long as their check comes home and they come home, then they can do whatever they want while the sun's out, or moon, or whatever. So yeah, I'm just agreeing with Christian.
But even going back to Lil Boosie, like when he had took to acknowledging that he allowed his 13-year-old son and all of his younger nephews to receive head and fellatio from a known adult woman who he also had engaged in sex activities with, his mindset was, this is the way we came up. Like,
right.
And so it always seems, it has always been a hypocrisy as well. Like when we think of pedophilia, we think of like that applies to male predators, but we don't seem to really acknowledge female predatorial behavior with the same guttural response. And maybe that has to do with patriarchy and male privilege, because men have the privilege and the power and the female principle submits, then of course there's more scrutiny and a double standard when it comes to men and women across the fucking board. But even that mentality was really scary to me when Lil Boosie admitted that, and he thought that it was normal because that was also his experience and his homeboys' experience and his friends' experiences, and the uncles are with you being 14. Yeah, like it's a rite of passage as a 14-year-old to smash your teacher. I remember I had friends who were fucking the teachers. Who were fucking like there was a whole scandal at my high school where my homeboy Fernando, I'm putting your dick on blast, nigga. He was smashing the science teacher. And come to find out, the science resume and what type of check and balance system my high school had for hiring, because this was also an amateur porn star, and we saw her porn. So I don't even know how the fuck she was. Look, that's a whole other story. However, these things were okay for young boys to engage in as it relates to older women, but obviously not younger girls as it related, or underage girls as it related to older men. How do you guys feel about the double standard that has existed as it relates to sexual abuse and sexuality and men and women in that double standard?
I think the double standard is definitely unfair. It's basically how society is set up, but it definitely is unfair. I mean, it makes the woman more of the like, for a woman to be a cougar, it's more of or if a older man was to get himself a younger woman, it's like, oh, he's feeling his oats, he's young again. For a woman, it's like, oh, sexually, but what do you want from, you just want to screw around and do whatever, and all kinds of craziness. But for a man, it's like, oh, you leveled up because you left your first wife, you married this younger woman, now you go in places doing trips and all this kind of stuff. And it's a horrible double standard that definitely needs to go away. But as far as that's just how I feel about that. It's just it should be equal across the board. But
and you, David? I mean, Antonio, I'm looking at the comments.
Who is David? I agree with Christian. I think it's horrible, because then what are we saying to our children when you do things like that? Like, does Lil Boosie have any daughters?
I don't think he does have daughters.
Okay, so I'm just curious. I mean, what would we say if the mother took her 3 daughters out to a male strip club and things went the way they went? Like, would it be such a thing? Like, well, no, that would be a whole different thing. Because
our witness says he does have daughters.
Oh, he does?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't know how old they are. They might be women. I don't know if they're younger.
Yeah, but I mean, like you said, if the shoe was on the other foot, if a woman had taken her daughters to a male strip club for that activity,
or it was video of them getting slapped across the face and stuff, they'd be whores.
Right, or for any of that, we would be totally against it, and they would, she would probably lose custody right then and there.
They would call CPS immediately. And they be
But
saying, "Oh, they're
isn't
gonna
that
be
the
16 and
abomination?
pregnant."
But isn't that the abomination of our country that little Boosie still is in possession of his 13-year-old son? But we know damn well that had that been a young girl who had been who had been sexually groomed in that way by her mother or her father, that the outrage would have been more catastrophic across the board, and the consequences would have been more objective if that was a girl rather than a boy. So
yeah, because it's acceptable. It's almost like, again, like, oh, it's what boys do. It's what men do. That's acceptable. Even as far as cheating, it's a thing in which if a man cheats, it's like, oh, well, that's what men do. But for me, being, having straight friends and, my brother and going through his situations and stuff like that, it's funny to me how he would have, he's probably going to hate me if he's watching, but he's probably not. He would have all these girlfriends. And I mean, a whole bunch, so much so that my grandmother lived with us growing up, so she would forget who was who, and she'd be like,
Oh,
"Hey,"
Lord.
and she say the wrong name, and they just look like, "Who's that?" And I'd just be in the corner cracking up. But I say that to say, when he was about to get married, he had his fiance at the time, because that's not who he married, but his fiance at the time wind up cheating on him. And you want to talk about somebody devastated? And I'm like, but you, and I know you've done so much to this person, and she just let it ride. The one time she does it, you're like, that's it. Oh my God, you went to the point of no return. I can't mess with you no more. And we had a sit down moment, and I'm just like, what? So how do you think she feels about you when she constantly took you back? Oh, I don't care. I'm hurt, man. I'm hurt.
no.
So that double standard is just always so crazy. Like, it really is crazy to me.
I need to remove my I need to mute me real quick, but y'all keep. I'll be right back.
So, no, that just always drove me crazy. Like, I never understood that at all.
So just a question I was going to propose next, but whatever, I'll still do it anyway. So let's just say, again, you have children, and because when I was growing up, when my mother did find out I was having sex, she would bring home condoms for me, because my mother said a lot. She's not raising nobody else's children but her own. So my mother, again, my mother's a nurse, so she would bring home condoms and say, make sure you use these, whatever. So the question is, whether you have a son, daughter, whatever, are you going to make and you do find out that they are having sex, are you going to provide, protection, birth control, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, of course. Like, one thing, I mean, you can set boundaries and rules, but you have, it's the hope that your child actually takes those things when they leave you and actually enforces them. So with that said, you have to be mindful that, yeah, you may not want them to have sex until they of age where they can really fully understand what they're doing, the transferring of spirits, all of that, that is involved in sex that people ignore, and then they wondering why they doing crazy shit, because the crazy person that you slept with, that's what they was about. But you just thought, oh, I just need this real quick, and it's just gonna be a one and done, and I'm finished. And yeah, but you brought something with you. So until they get to that point where they understand all that, if they happen to have sex before then, all I can do as a parent myself is just, not that I am a parent, but hypothetically speaking, is just make sure that
when I have your child.
Oh.
I'm in the room.
But it just makes sure and pray that that they are safe. That's all you can do. I am a product of a mother who was quite overprotective, but I found ways to just get around that. And not that she was overprotective, like, who you sleeping with, but it was just, very just like, what are you doing? Who you with? I need names and numbers. You know what I'm saying? So it was just like, if she didn't know you, you was not, you weren't coming nowhere near me. But I understand that. But for some, it makes them rebel once they leave that situation and they start doing all kinds of craziness. I have a twin, and it was like, I look at her sideways and be like, would we come in the same? We came from the same, at almost the same time, and we lived in the same house, and you totally act nothing like, you wouldn't even think that this woman was raised by the same person. So I don't know. It all depends on the person, but my hope would be in wrapping this up that they would be safe.
Okay. So I wanted to respond to Nikki's comment. She said, back in the day, once a young lady started her cycle, they called it welcome to womanhood. Also in my mother's time, a lot of them became pregnant and even left the house at 14, and some got married at 14. I want to speak to that because when I speak to my grandmother, she always tells me a lot of questions about what happened during her heyday. And she spoke about like when girls pregnant as teenagers, she sent them up north to live with other relatives because they brought shame to the family. She also talked about how like a lot of Black girls were being groomed to be married to older men who had property, who had wealth, because this was kind of a part of establishing social hierarchy and kind of preserving resources, was this exchange for Black girls' body, Black girls' ness, in exchange for that privilege, which is not really a new thing, because even when you study biblical times, arranged marriages were there for a reason. A lot of times women were arranged to be married or were welcome to marry or encouraged to marry men of a certain societal hierarchical structure for the sake of preserving the family name, for making the family wealthy, for possessing land, etc. And so in that way, but that's like, woo, child, when you blend survival and the question of ethics and morals together, you get some interesting shit that has happened in society. Because while on one end, people are trying to absolve their lineage of poverty, because money also brings about great health, because you have more things afforded to you in terms of health, in terms of food, in terms of finance, in terms of resources. But on the other hand, it's just another form of prostitution. You're pimping out young boys and young girls in exchange. And this is literally so I guess now heterosexuals have their own version of trade. They are trade in their own damn way, because they've been trading their babies off, okay? Trading them off, for real. And my grandmother said this was normal. She said she saw so many young girls in her neighborhood go off to be married to older men who had more. And I just think that's fucked up. It's really fucked up. Now somebody else, but I think that you just spoke to it, Antonio, or maybe it was you, Christian, or maybe you both did, spoke about what do we tell our children about sex? Like what is the point of it? Under what circumstances should you have it? And I know that everybody got the birds and the bees conversation. Some people didn't get it at all.
Right.
For the parents who were too bougie to provide that service.
Exactly.
My dad definitely gave me my brother that conversation very, very early on in our life. And my mom always, even though my mom also started bringing condoms home for me when I entered into my teenageness, she also maintained that she wasn't encouraging sex, but I guess it was her way of acknowledging what could be the inevitable, which is I'm inevitably going to have sex, even against her will, that there would be resources in etc. So to you, Antonio, what would you teach your child about sex? Why have it?
Well, first I would definitely I wouldn't go the scare tactic, like showing them everything that could happen if you have sex. You can end up with genital warts and this, that, and the other, and this is what it looks like. And but I would have an honest conversation with them about every aspect of having sex, what it involves. Like I said, the transferring of spirits, all that other kind of stuff. I would not, unlike myself, wait until you've broken the lock off the cable box and your dad's like, I guess I got to have this discussion with you because you figured out how to break the lock on the cable box so you could watch the Playboy channel. Yes, I have. I've been doing this for a long time, but I broke the lock at this point to the point where it would not latch back. So yeah, that's how I got busted, and I wound up having a conversation. But my mother would not have the conversation. Like it'd be like, oh, I ain't talking about that. I'll let him talk to you about that. And when he actually decided to have the conversation, is because really I got busted. And his whole conversation, it was like, yep, okay, yep, that happens, this happens, and yeah, and stop watching that because if you keep doing that, you're gonna break something. And yeah, I love you, and that was it. And it was like, what? Okay. And I, going to health class or whatever, you learn about it and all that kind of stuff. So I had already known, but it was like I expected more because it was like, oh, okay, So when I have children, I will definitely have the discussion with them. Even at a young age, I will make them very aware of the, hey, if someone touches you here or anywhere that you feel uncomfortable, never be afraid to speak up and say something. I say that because in the instance that happened with me, when I finally came out to my siblings and my oldest brother, I told him exactly how it transitioned for me. He was like, oh yeah, the same thing happened to me, but it didn't stick. I was just like, the fuck you mean? Okay, so you mean to tell me you being older than me said nothing to protect me and you allowed that to just like happen? I'm confused. So it was a bit and that took a bit of growing up to kind of get out that space. So, but yeah.
I just want to say to Toots, not in my house, I just knew not to do it. That speaks to male privilege, because if I was a girl, the only thing my mama would have been bringing home is a bitch, I dare you to do it. I dare you to do it. So,
well, that's not true. I'd have to disagree with that.
My mom would have definitely treated her girls different than her boys.
Yeah, I mean, my mom would have too. Yeah, my mom would have too, but she was definitely still against it. Like, my dad was more of the, oh, let him go ahead and do it. You know what I'm saying? But my mother, if she heard it, like she worked nights. So usually when he did his little rendezvous, my mother wasn't home at all. But if he didn't know my mother was home and I decided not to tell him because I wanted the shit show to happen, when he would do it and she would hear it because her room was below his was above, she would run up there. I mean, she would just bust open the door, tell homegirl she got to go and all that kind of stuff. So in that aspect, she was very much not in my house, period. But if you do it in my house, you better hell make sure I'm not there, because if I'm there, I'm ripping up shop.
Yeah.
Okay. Antonio?
My mother did have a sex talk with me. I'm gonna paraphrase this.
It ain't do no damn good for what we now know. Shit.
So so there's two little quick stories I'm gonna tell you. So when my mother did decide to have this sex talk with me, this is before she knew. So she said, you have to be careful because when you stick your dick in a girl's pussy, you might fuck around and get her pregnant. So please make sure you wear the condom. And I'm like, okay. She goes, yep. Any questions? Like, no. She goes, oh, okay. And that was that. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but that was pretty much the whole sex talk.
Right.
And then when she did find out that I had that, she found out because that girl at the time, she lived 4 doors up from me. So whenever I would come home from school, my mother had to get me because I ran track. Whenever my mother and I would pull up at the door, the girl was always sitting at the front step. So after about a week, we pulled up at the door and my mother said, "She's here again." And I said, "Yep." And she turned over to me in the car and she said, "You fucked her, didn't you?" I was like, "Huh?" She goes, "You fucked her, didn't you?" I was like, "Yes." She said, "Yeah, I figured. Because there's no reason she should be able to smell your dick as it's coming down the street." This is my mother. Christian has met my mother. You know, this is how my mother talks.
That's why that's so funny to me, because I can still see her totally saying that.
Yeah, that's how my mother has never been a sugarcoater.
No, she's a sharpshooter.
They say mamas always know.
Yeah.
And my mother would raise 3 boys. My stepfather left, so she said she had to be the mom and the dad. So once that happened, that's when the little bit of filter she had went away. Because now she's like, I gotta keep up with y'all. So all of that just left. Like it was just, she would just say whatever came out. So in regards to my sex conversation with my children, I don't necessarily know how it would go. Like me being honest, I would want to make sure that they fully understand what they're doing. And I would fully want them to understand what the repercussions would be. Okay, yeah, you got your nut and it felt good, but you got to make sure that if you're a boy, again, like my mom said, you got to make sure that if you're doing it wrong, you got to pull out. And if you have a but I suggest that you always wear a condom, because again, if you get somebody pregnant, I don't know what we're going to do. I mean, I don't know. And if I have a daughter, it's one of those things where, again, I can't stop you. I can't stop you. If you want to go out there and do it, if we need to go get some birth control or something, if you already doing it and you don't feel comfortable telling me, that's fine. We can.
That ain't fine. You better be comfortable telling me.
Again, I can't force that.
You can nurture that though, but you can nurture that relationship to where in which they will be comfortable to talk to you.
But it's one of those things where we can go to the doctor, we can discuss things, because again, my mom's a nurse. We can go to grandma's house. Grandma, she got a lot to say. I'm pretty sure she'd be more than happy to explain.
Now, one thing I will say, I will not do a TI. I'm not sitting there talking about let me check the hymen with the doctor to make sure it's intact. That's a bit disgusting and disrespectful. And especially as he likes to fling his own penis around, I thought that was a big, like, what? How are you flinging your penis around, but you sitting up here checking to make sure somebody's
male privilege.
He never I know.
The boys. He never. As a matter of fact, he's on tape in his show, encouraging his sons and rewarding them emotionally if they've already broken the bow. Now, for me personally, what I'm going to tell my children is, don't you listen to white people. I do tell you to have sex. And then I'm going to tell them that there is something I can do about you having sex. It's called a gun, and I will kill you. And then I will have another child to replace you with, because you are replaceable.
So that's bold.
That's
bold. Real bold.
Papa ain't raising no damn babies either. Okay. And if you wants to be fucking, sticking and licking and swallowing and all of that good shit, you best to be old enough to be able to afford rent, insurance, your phone bill, food, lunch money.
That I agree with.
Jordan, Timberlands, you better be able to stand up as a grown ass man if you want to do things that can bring about grown ass consequences. Because having AIDS is a real thing. Having children is a real thing. Participating in an activity that can compromise your health potentially is a real thing. So as long as you're in my house, you're my concern, and you're my concern.
Right.
That's all I'm gonna say. Now,
that's it. That's all.
Now, the bit more reasonable side of me wants to say that if I had to choose between the lesser of two evils, when my children get to an age where they're interested in dating and all of that, I might be willing to have a conversation around how it is natural to want to be physically affectionate towards someone that you really care about, and teach them the emotional value of affection. But I would encourage them to preserve actual penetration and intercourse for someone that you're willing to spend your life with. And of course, if they didn't do that and they lost their virginity anywhere, they're my children. Sex is going to happen. It is what it is. But that's what I would tell them, and that's what I would encourage. Bringing it back to pedophilia. Any remaining remarks about pedophilia? No.
Oh, again, just to finalize for the chat, for the people who came in late, we have discussed the difference between a sexual orientation and a fetish. And I don't know how they feel, but in my opinion, pedophilia is a fetish, not a sexual orientation in regards to the topic of the video. Okay, that's it.
So something, Christian, someone want to say to fetish. Somebody asked a very interesting question. They said, do you consider role play to also, I guess, kind of exist on the same lines as bestiality, like people who like to pup play, dress up as animals, fuck people in costumes? Do you consider that bestiality if someone likes for their partner to dress up as an animal and that gets them off to imagine that they're fucking a dog or a horse or a sheep? Or even when you brought up porn and how there are categories for the young schoolgirl getting fucked by her stepdad, or the teenager getting fucked by the mailman, like those fetishes do exist on porn and are legalized. But do you think that those things are just as cause for concern? Like if somebody even gets off that way, even if it's under the guise of imagination and fantasy, but not necessarily, because when you say it's a fetish is more so. Some fetishes can play into the imagination, while things like a pedophilia are like real for some people. Like these are people who don't want a 21-year-old dressing up like a hot 14-year-old babe. They want an actual 14-year-old girl. They want an actual 6-year-old girl or 6-year-old boy. So how do you distinguish the fetish from the genuine, I guess, the genuine impulses that pedophiles experience or have?
That's actually a really good question.
I know.
Because yeah, that's a really good question, because most fetishes are based off of the imagination,
fantasy, right? Fantasy.
So for the people who dress up as animals, they're called furries, they don't necessarily want to.
And you would know that.
Yes, I would. But they don't necessarily want to actually sleep with a fox or sleep with a wolf or sleep with a bear. They want to just experience what, I guess, just the fantasy, like you said. So I guess it wouldn't necessarily, because again, there's a difference between sleeping with your wife who's dressed as a schoolgirl and actually sleeping with a schoolgirl. There's a complete difference. So I guess it wouldn't even be considered a fetish at that point. What would it be called? See, now we're back to square one.
Pedophilia is what it would be called, scientifically defined.
That's only if they've acted.
Yeah, but if they've acted on the sexual fantasy,
if they've acted on it, and yeah, that's a done deal.
But I don't even think it comes down to act. I think it comes down to like the
thought,
how authentic the impulse is. Because I think people who have a fantasy can distinguish their feeling or desire as fantasy.
Can they?
Like, yeah, I think that there are vibrational differences to thoughts and feelings that allow us to be more intuitive about the way we understand what we feel. So I think we are, you know, like humans are.
But if we're getting if we're getting into feelings and vibrations, then we're getting into what Antonio talked about earlier about self-control.
Okay, but once again, we also are talking about pedophiles from the context of probably the majority of pedophiles have self-control, which is why every child isn't being molested, and everybody isn't having.
But again, they wouldn't be labeled as pedophiles if they haven't done anything.
Right.
Well, but see, the reason why I have to challenge that is because I was gay before I acted upon being gay. It wasn't a fantasy. Like I knew I was attracted to men before, are the same sex, even before I lost my virginity. So do heterosexuals know that they're heterosexual before they physically experience sex with the opposite sex. So I don't think.
And even that goes back to the definitions that I presented earlier. Sexual orientation is based around gender. A fetish is based around what arouses you in terms of objects, things, scenarios, things like that.
Well,
so there's a clear difference between the two.
But you got to keep in mind, that's what's interesting about the definition for sexual orientation being about gender, because it didn't create any nuance in terms of the age of gender, the ethnicity of the gender. So all that can still fit within the category of orientation, technically.
Mm-hmm.
Because the definition is so broad that it can encompass all because it lacks nuance, because it's so broad that I think this is why the question is it a sexual orientation? Mm-hmm. Because you can have genders too. I mean, they're either male or female. And if a sexual orientation by definition is just a predominant interest in a particular gender or genders, then anybody can fit within that fucking category, because we all have a gender, we all have a sex, male or female. So, right. But see, this is the thing. I don't know. Look, if pedophiles wanted to call, if science or pedophile or the institution of learning and education wanted to consider pedophilia a sexual orientation, that doesn't bother me, because it ain't my fucking orientation, no matter what the fuck you are calling it. Like, I personally don't give a fuck. And I also don't think that by calling it a sexual orientation that it makes it permittable, because I can acknowledge your desires while still also having a moral and ethical attitude toward that allows me to say I don't believe that's right, even though I agree that that's your function, or that's your science, that's your makeup for that's your deviance, like whatever the fuck it is. Like, it just, I think sexual orientation, deviance is fucking semantics for the most part. Irregardless, my bigger question is, irregardless of whether we consider it a disorder, because ultimately people want to look at it how the fuck they want to look at it any goddamn way. So whether we look at it as an orientation or we look at it as a disorder, my bigger concern is, how are we treating this? Like, how are we going to treat this phenomenon that we, for the most part, still don't fucking understand? And what research are we going to devote to understanding this shit, so that we can better keep the pedophiles of our community under control, accountable, or whatever the case may be? Like, I don't even care about the language around pedophilia more than I am about what provisions are being made, because it is a little scary that you have pedophiles who have not self-acknowledged their their feelings, and these can be your neighbors, these could be the teachers, this could be the school bus driver, this could be the child care provider that you're leaving your children with. That is terrifying. And somebody asked another deep question, which is, like, even for pedophiles who don't act upon it, do we treat them the same as people who do? And unfortunately, I think that that's probably why so many pedophiles who don't act on it will never come out, because they are afraid of being treated like pedophiles
or labeled as a pedophile,
which just furthers the secrecy. So I'm just not really sure where we go from there, but I do think maybe the start is having conversations around what what provisions need to be made to better equip our community and to better like strengthen these people so that they can continue to be self-quarantined as it relates to their disorder, deviance, or orientation. You want to say something, Christian?
Yeah, conversation and education is key in getting to, I guess, getting to an avenue where a dialogue can be had in understanding that concept. I personally, again, if the person hasn't acted upon it, me calling them a pedophile and they haven't physically acted upon it, I'm a little torn between that. That's what I said in the beginning. I don't know. It's still iffy. How do I feel about Woody Allen? Somebody asked. He is definite pedophile. Of course, when you have money.
Who the fuck is Woody Allen?
The director that he had sexual relations with his adopted daughter and then wind up marrying her, but she was underage while they was having.
Who husband?
Mia Farrow.
Ex-husband.
Who the fuck is that?
Woody Allen, it doesn't matter. Woody Allen and Mia Farrow were married.
Right.
Are these white people or black people talking about?
White people. He's a director. He's a famous director, actually.
They're older. It's an older generation. It's like an older. But they were married and they adopted.
He's a celebrated director at that.
Yes. And they adopted a young Asian girl. I think her name was Soon Yi. If I'm incorrect, I'm not being funny. I really think that's her name.
Yeah, I think it is.
But after Soon Yi turned 18, he married his stepdaughter.
Yeah, but they were already having sexual relations before she was 18. She was definitely very much underage. He was definitely a pedophile. And no Me Too movement, no boycott, no nothing was ever done. It was talked about for a while. She was in the headlines for a while. The whole situation was in the headlines and on the papers, but nobody did anything about it. They are still married to this day.
Look, I like a lot of people. Me personally, I don't understand the attraction to young people. Like I said, ever since I've been young, I've been disgusted with young people. So I just don't. I mean, I don't get it. I don't even know if it's important for me to get it or not. I mean, it's somebody's reality, but there's nothing more sexy than somebody who you know is experienced and slanging type. Like somebody who's experienced and seasoned and have grown into their bone structure and grown into their bodies and grown into the
responsibility and all the other stuff that comes along.
But yikes. But yeah, so I'm really happy that you guys almost were here with me for like 2 hours. I wanted to have this conversation because I just I'm not sure if not talking about this is even helping these people who can become potential predators and potential violators out. So I just wanted to have a conversation and also, inform people that when you think of pedophiles, don't just think about people who have already acted. There is the other side of it, which are people who have not acted, who are deciding not to act on it. And the question is, as a society, what do we need to do to help pedophiles from acting on their pedophilia? Because that's going to be of good service to us all. The minute that we get to all of those, get to remedying that issue. If there's any, I want you guys to give your social medias before we wrap this conversation up. Christian, where can they find you, Mr. Captivating?
You can find me definitely here on YouTube as well as Instagram, but that is private. So if you, it is Captivating Christian as well. So you could leave your little thing there, and when I get around to it, I will accept you. But like I said, it is private, and not for no reasons. Like you won't see no peen or nothing like that. I just like to.
It's all there.
I just like
in the room.
What people see. I don't like everybody in my business, but yeah. Other than that, I'm here. I'm on YouTube. Midday news at 12. The gentleman's panel, as it was mentioned, I am a panelist. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. And thank you once again for having me.
Of course. Antonio, where can the folk find you?
On everybody else's videos. I'm apparently the featured artist on a lot of people's videos, and I'm actually content with staying that way. I don't mind, because I personally can't see me doing personal videos, because honestly, I'd rather just join in with everybody else. I'm here. Hey.
You're the handy dandy YouTube sidekick. I love it.
And you know what? That's fine. That is completely fine.
I think you're going to be having your channel very soon. I see it in my crystal ball. You're going to be establishing your own kingdom very soon. Trust me.
We're going to get some Windex for that ball. All
right.
Man, we're going to clean this.
Okay. Well, I'm going to let you guys go. I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. This is a very sensitive conversation to have. So I hope we did a great job at articulating what we're communicating. And just going back to the initial title, we have dispelled the notion that the LGBT movement is not connected to maps or minor attracted persons, that this is literally a urban legend. If you see those pockets of that happening, that's just the movement being co-opted and being hijacked by another movement, but that is not being personally endorsed. And even the founder of MAPS released a statement saying that this organization in no way, shape, or form is in cahoots with the LGBT movement at all. So pedophilia and bestiality and all this other shit that y'all be wanting to run up in the train of the acronym is not there, baby. The little caboose ended on the A. Okay, LGBTQIA. A is the little caboose that could. It's the last bit of the train your ass gonna see. Okay, there's nothing else coming down the pipeline. So we love you all. Thank you guys for tuning in, and make sure you subscribe to all of these guys' channel. Their handles will be in the description box below, and I will talk to you guys.
All right, thank you. Peace, 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 peace.